Welcome to Unlocking the Dream Vision. I'm your host, author R.J.VON-BRUENING. In this video series, we will be exploring the mysterious dream vision of Enoch, as explored in my book, Unlocking the Dream Vision, The Secret History of Creation. In this video, we will take a look at the all-important event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth, and we will also learn the secret meaning of the all-seeing eye and the unfinished pyramid. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button below and subscribe for future videos. This series presents information based in part upon theory and conjecture of the system of esoteric symbolism. The purpose is to suggest some possible interpretation, but not necessarily the only one, to the many mysteries we will explore. We have finally reached one of the most important, but also at the same time one of the least known events of all of human history. That one fateful day when Enoch was taken from the generations of the earth. In order for us to understand why this event is so important, we need to return to King Solomon's temple and the events that happened right after the death of King Solomon. After the construction and great dedication of King Solomon's temple and citadel, the Bible tells us of the long, wealthy, and legendary reign of King Solomon. We are told that King Solomon was one of the greatest, wisest leaders of all the ancient world, something that is still commonly believed to this day. It is also stated that he followed in the footsteps of his father King David, and he faithfully served his Lord God. It has traditionally been believed that it was a great golden age for the people who made up the tribes of Israel, an age that is remembered and longed for by many even to this day. But like all good things, the great wise reign of King Solomon was not meant to last forever. Soon after his death, the Bible tells us that the kingdom of Israel fractured into two separate kingdoms, one known as the kingdom of Judea, centered on the city of Jerusalem, around the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. The other being made up the other 10 tribes of Israel, which have traditionally been believed to occupy the lands to the north of the ancient city of Jerusalem. But as we've already learned from the dream vision in the Exodus story, this traditional interpretation of the 10 tribes is incorrect, and the people of these 10 tribes of Israel were actually spread around the world. If we combine this knowledge with the biblical account, we can then begin to realize that the ancient city of Samaria, which is traditionally thought to have been the kingdom of Israel, is most likely only the capital city of the kingdom of Israel and not the actual kingdom of Israel itself as traditionally believed. In the Bible, we are told that after the death of King Solomon, both kingdoms of the tribes of Israel slowly went downhill over the next few centuries. This slow general downfall of the kingdoms of the tribes of Israel leads to them both being invaded. The first to be invaded and conquered was the capital city of Samaria of the kingdom of Israel by the Assyrian Empire. The kingdom of Judea, centered around the city of Jerusalem, is believed to have existed for almost 2 more centuries as an independent state until it was conquered by the Neo-Babylon Empire under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. It is shortly after this that we are told that the great temple and citadel of King Solomon is looted and then destroyed, with it being burnt to the ground. The destruction of the first temple is an event that leads to the famous captivity of the Israelites in Babylon, where historically they become known as the Jews. It is believed that the first books of the Bible were written down for the first time during this Babylonian captivity. It is the events leading up to and surrounding the destruction of King Solomon's temple that are the most important here. What you will find surprising is the fact that it is something you already know very well and something you've seen many times throughout your life. As you will learn, it is also the origin of the most famous mystical symbol in modern times, the mysterious unfinished pyramid and the all-seeing eye on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States of America that is on the back of every single dollar bill. This is the next step in understanding how this great event imparts the final meanings to the most famous of all mystical symbols, the triangle. In order to begin this new understanding of the mystical symbolism, we must first return to the next set of verses in the dream vision of Enoch. And again I saw those sheep, and they again erred and went many ways, and forsook their house. And the Lord of the sheep called some from amongst the sheep, and sent them to the sheep. But the sheep began to slay them, and one of them was saved, and was not slain. And it sped away and cried aloud over the other sheep, and they sought to slay it. But the Lord of the sheep saved it from the sheep, and brought it up to me, and caused it to dwell there. And many other sheep he sent to those sheep to testify unto them, and lament over them. And after that I saw that they forsook the house of the Lord and his tower. They fell away entirely, and their eyes were blinded. And I saw the Lord of the sheep, how he wrought much slaughter amongst them in their herds, until those sheep invited that slaughter and betrayed his place. Book of Enoch, chapter 89, verses 51 through 54. What most are unaware of is that this event is vaguely recorded in the Bible in verse 15, chapter 36 of 2 Chronicles. The primary difference between the two accounts is that the biblical account leaves out that all the sheep sent by the Lord of the sheep were slain. All but one. The account in 2 Chronicles 36:15 only speaks of how the messengers of God were mocked, and they despised their words and misused his prophets. The omitted part of the story that is revealed by the dream vision is that one of them was saved and not slain, and then was taken by the Lord of the sheep, is one of the most important events of all time. There are two primary reasons for this. The first one is that the sheep that escaped, that the dream vision speaks of, is the one remembered as Enoch. The second is that this event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth is actually an event that signals the beginning of an almost forgotten war. Additionally, it is this event when the followers and allies of the great Lord of Light faction fought back against the Lord God faction for the first time since the Great Flood. This almost forgotten war is almost completely omitted from the Bible as a whole, except for the final events, which are recorded in the mysterious and symbolic Book of Revelations. Not only has this war been omitted from the Bible, but it's been primarily replaced by the books of the prophets and the books of the New Testament. But as you will learn and begin to see, the followers of the esoteric religions remember this event. Not only do they remember it, but is in fact the major focus of the mystical symbolism of the unfinished pyramid and the all-seeing eye on the Great Seal of the United States of America on the back of the dollar bill. This is the mysterious event that I spoke of in an earlier video that occurred just before the Great Flood in chapter 87 of the Dream Vision, of when Enoch is taken away from the generations of the earth, is actually speaking of a much later event. This is one of the few places within the Dream Vision that it has obviously been tampered with. If we return for a moment to chapter 87 of the Dream Vision, we can see that the verses 2 and 3 from the Dream Vision are clearly related to this event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth. And I raised my eyes again to heaven, and I saw in the vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men, and 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. And those 3 that had last come forth grasped me by my hand, and took me up away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. Book of Enoch, chapter 87, verses 2 and 3. These 2 verses from almost the very beginning of the Dream Vision are obviously related to this event surrounding the first temple, and not the Great Flood of Noah. This is also our first real evidence that the traditional placement of Enoch in the overall story is incorrect. He did not come at the beginning of the story as we are commonly told in the book of Genesis, and as we've been traditionally taught to believe, but he actually comes much closer to the end of the story. Although there may very well have been an ancient patriarch named Enoch that lived before the flood, we can now begin to realize that this is not the same Enoch that was taken from the generations of the earth. To begin properly understanding this, we must first realize that Enoch is one of the sheep that the Lord of the sheep comes to in the dream vision. He is also the sheep that is not slayed, but escapes from the others, and who is ultimately saved by the Lord of the sheep. Now, what is truly remarkable is that this entire event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth by the 4 that went forth from that place, and 3 with them, is recorded in perfect symbolic detail on numerous ancient cylinder seals and other artifacts. This is the next important step in understanding the symbolic dream vision in the ancient Book of Enoch, is that the story told on the ancient cylinder seals and numerous other artifacts around the world. As we can see here in this first cylinder seal, it records this incredible event. It contains almost all the mystical symbolic elements we have explored up to this point. You will notice that it's almost a perfect symbolic image of what we just explored in the dream vision. Within this image, we can see Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth. On the far right, we see a symbolic representation of the tower that Enoch speaks of in chapter 87, verse 3. And those 3 that had come forth grasped me by my hand and took me up away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. We can also see that one of the bulls is being attacked by one of the 3 that had come from heaven and looked like white men. It is only through our new understanding that the symbolism of the bull represents the first men that fell from grace, that we can begin to understand that this symbolically represents the ones that had become blinded and fallen away. Symbolically, it also informs us that they were following the great Lord of Light faction. On the left side of the seal, we see 2 figures. These are the other 2 of the 3 Enoch speaks of in the dream vision. It is only through our new knowledge of the symbolic dream vision that we can begin to understand that men symbolically represent angels or a higher state of being, which then allows us to understand the deeper meaning of the scene, and that these are not 3 men, but 3 angels. You can see that one of these angels is standing on the back of what appears to be a griffin. A griffin is a legendary creature with the body, back legs, and the tail of a lion, with the head and wings of an eagle. Traditionally, griffins were thought to be an especially majestic and powerful creature. Many believe the griffin to be the king of all creatures. They were also known for guarding treasures and magical possessions. It was also a symbol of divine power that was normally thought of as a guardian of the divine and the gods themselves. With our new knowledge that this is Cro-Magnon man we are speaking of and not ourselves, we can begin understanding that this is a symbolic representation of technology that Cro-Magnon man could not understand. So he made a symbolic creature to represent this. In this particular case, it tells us that this is a vehicle of the gods that was strong and fast like a lion, and that it could fly like an eagle. Once you realize that this is a symbolic representation of a technology that our ancient Cro-Magnon man ancestors could not understand, it allows us to take the next step. By realizing that the legendary griffin is not a mythical monster, but is actually a technologically advanced vehicle or craft of the gods, one that could move swiftly like a lion on the ground, but could also fly like a great eagle. With our modern understanding of flight, we can realize that the legendary griffin of mythology could in fact be very similar to a modern-day helicopter or a similar vertical takeoff craft. Very shortly, we will see another artifact that will help clarify this interpretation. The next symbol is the crescent moon in the upper left-hand side with one of the other symbols. It is difficult to see which it is, but given the context of the events, we can assume it is a solar disk symbol that represents the Lord of Light. Unlike before, this is symbolically showing us that the Lord of Light faction and the Goddess faction have apparently allied together against the Lord God faction. In this next cylinder seal, it shows us the exact same scene, but it provides additional symbolic information. It will also give you a better understanding of how the symbolism is used to tell this story in general. In the center of this image, we can see the three that came forth, which looked like white men above the ground, with others in the center. On the right hand of the seal, we can see Enoch being taken away on a great bird with what appears to be two wolf-like creatures under it trying to attack it. On the left side, we see a tree with a great bird upon it, with two lions attacking it. This tree is another symbolic representation of a tower that a god would stand upon. In the center, on the bottom, we see a figure what appears to be several horned sheep or rams behind it. Taken as a whole, we can see the entire symbolic story of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth on this cylinder seal that strikingly matches the description given in the dream vision. Starting with the heavenly figure in the center that is holding a rectangular shaped object as if he's speaking to the man figure on the bottom. This is the one of the three that came forth to save Enoch, clearly speaking to Enoch. The next scene to the left of center is showing us Enoch escaping from the other sheep or rams, where he then comes to the tower with a great bird upon it. We can see that this tower is being attacked by what appears to be lions, which we've already learned symbolically represents the Babylonians. The final scene is on the right side of the seal, showing us Enoch flying away from the tower with two wolf-like animals directly below. And as we've already learned, this symbolically represents the Egyptians. As you can now see with your own eyes, this is symbolically the exact same story that is told within the dream vision. You can now also understand that this cylinder seal would stay a complete mystery to any and all that did not know of or understand the mystical animal symbolism of the dream vision of Enoch. Additionally, there were numerous people that remembered and recorded this event, as we can see here on these other cylinder seals from different cultures. As with the first cylinder seal we examined in the last video, with the dedication of the lofty tower built upon a low house, I need to point out the Pleiades cluster that is visible in the upper center by the three heavenly beings. You will notice that it is slightly different than before, with 8 stars being visible. I would again ask you to make a special note about this configuration. We will be taking a much closer look at why the stars have changed between the cylinder seals and why it's so very important to understanding the timeline of these events. This next image is not a cylinder seal, as you can see, but it is an artifact that is a Carthaginian stela. This Carthaginian stela is almost identical to the Canaanite belief, with similar inscriptions and symbolism found on it. The artifact appears to have been used as a grave marker that was set up over burial urns containing the cremated bodies of babies and small children, along with animals who had been sacrificed to the goddess Taint and her consort Baal. Because of its location, the artifact has been interpreted by scholars as being a version of the goddess Tanit. As you will see, this interpretation is clearly incorrect. In this image, we have a much simpler symbolic design than we had seen on the cylinder seals. As you can now understand, this is clearly related to the event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth. It also provides additional symbolic information about Enoch's escape. More importantly, it provides us with the first clue to a possible location of this monumental event. As with the cylinder seals, we can see the 3 that came forth in the upper part of the artifact. These are represented by 3 circles or astral symbols, as they are known, with one being much larger and higher than the other 2. This larger one also has 12 petal-like, flower-like symbolism in its center. As you can now understand, this symbolically represents its higher importance over the other two and is connected to the heaven. This representation of its higher importance to the others brings us closer to the traditional idea that Enoch was taken by God himself. It's also a symbolic representation that these three that came forth were circular in design, which is very similar to the symbolic meaning of the legendary griffin, and also the possibility that they were a helicopter-like craft. There's also our first glimpse of the forbidden knowledge of what the Lord God of the Bible may have looked like. The small pyramid in the center is the next important symbol in this image. It is a clue that provides the location of this event, which, based on the small triangle or pyramid symbol, logic tells us must be the Giza Plateau of Egypt. Just above the pyramid symbol, we can also see the crescent moon symbol with the solar disk symbol together as before on the cylinder seals. This again is showing us the alliance between the Lord of Light faction and the Goddess faction. The next important symbolic element is at the bottom, where we see a square shape under Enoch sitting in a valley. The square symbolically represents the temple, with the small depression under it representing the valley where this temple stood. When combined with the small pyramid symbol, it allows us to realize that this is symbolically representing the Nile River Valley. The last symbolic element on this artifact is a symbol that we did not see on the cylinder seals. And these are the two caducees on each side of the artifact. The caducees is traditionally represented by two serpents coiling around a staff with wings. This is the herald staff of the gods, with Hermes of Greek mythology and Mercury of Roman mythology being the two most famous examples from history. This then provides us with the next additional piece of the story, that once Enoch had reached a temple located somewhere in the Nile Valley, he then used the caducees to summon the Lord God, who then came with two angels and saved him from the others. In this next image, you can see that it is not an ancient artifact that is thousands of years old, but comes directly from the most famous branch of esoteric religion that still exists today, Freemasonry. This image comes from a print in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry located between the pages of 188 and 189 in Volume 1 of the book. This is a much more refined symbolic image that brings together almost all the symbolic elements we have been exploring into its final form that we are all so familiar with. This is the next important step to understanding that the symbolic dream vision is without a doubt the hidden symbolic story of the esoteric religions. It is also the final step in realizing for the first time that this is undeniable proof that the great event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth is what is symbolically shown on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States of America, and that is on the back of every single $1 bill in circulation. Within this image, we can clearly see all the mystical symbolic elements we have explored related to Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth are present in this one drawing. Starting from the bottom and then working our way up from there, we can see two columns that are very similar to the caducees we just saw on the last image. Above the column on the left, we can see a traditional caducees with a globe of the world over the one on the right. Between the two columns, we can see a temple with a pyramid-shaped roof with a sun-like or eye-like object in its center. This again is symbolically pointing to the Nile River Valley and the Giza Plateau as the location of this temple. Just above this temple, we can see the righteous scribe Enoch with a dove and small crescent moon next to his head, symbolically representing his peaceful nature and wisdom. Just above the righteous scribe Enoch, we see a triangle that appears to be spinning, surrounded by clouds with 7 symbolic angels. We can also see the traditional symbolism for all the ancient elements of earth, water, fire, and air within the circle of clouds surrounding the spinning triangle. These are the 4 elements of creation and is a symbolic representation of creation itself. This allows one to realize, though you may not have recognized it at first, this is a strictly forbidden and highly heretical graven image of the God of the Bible. As you can see in this symbolic drawing of a great glowing spinning triangle, this is a symbolic representation of a great triangular shaped ship. This allows us to begin understanding for the very first time in modern history of just why it has always been strictly forbidden to make any graven images of the one true God of the Bible. It is because we modern humans would quickly recognize that the mighty God of the Bible is not some mysterious, all-powerful, all-knowing divine being, but it is in fact a technologically advanced triangular shaped ship that our ancient Cro-Magnon man ancestors could not comprehend and naturally interpreted as God. This is also the event that imparts the final meaning of the symbol of the triangle. It also is a forbidden graven image of the one true Lord God of the Bible. This also allows us to understand that the Star of David is just a simplified symbolic representation of the great spinning triangle that came and took Enoch from the generations of the earth. It also allows us to understand why the ancient people of Israel were so terrified and could not stand before their Lord at the holy mountain of God in Exodus. The last important aspect of this forbidden graven image of the Lord God is the three numbers within it, 1, 3, and 4. These numbers are directly related to the verses of the dream vision of where Enoch says, "I saw 4 went forth from that place and 3 with them. And those 3 that had last come forth grasped me by my hand and took me up." This allows us to understand that each number represents the 2 groups of angels, with the number 1 representing Enoch. Also, if you will notice, there are also 7 angels within the clouds surrounding the Lord God. Again, this is another direct connection to the verses within the dream vision. Above this forbidden image of God surrounded by his angels, we see a symbolic representation of the all-seeing eye of the heaven looking down from above. In this image, the all-seeing eye is shown as a face, just as we had seen earlier with the ancient Aztec calendar, which is a rather common symbolic representation by other ancient cultures from around the world that recorded it. The final step and the last piece of the puzzle is when we bring all these mystical symbolic elements together into one simplified form. We come up with the most famous of all mystical symbols known the world over, the unfinished pyramid and the all-seeing eye on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States of America that is on the back of every $1 bill, as we can see here. This unfinished pyramid is the final piece of the puzzle that gives us a location of this event. The next step is to realize that this common pyramid symbolism is the key to understanding the triangle symbolism of the unfinished pyramid itself. The first thing we must understand is that there are no known unfinished pyramids located in Egypt, but it allows us to understand that this structure must not have been an unfinished pyramid at all, but is more likely a pyramid-shaped platform. If we turn to the ruins of ancient Egypt with this idea in mind, you may be surprised to discover that there is a location in Egypt that could be possible to match onto what we see on the back of every $1 bill. This possible location is known as the Pyramid of Djefri, located north of the Giza Plateau. If you examine this site with Google Earth or other similar satellite imagery and carefully measure the so-called Pyramid of Djefri, you will discover that the pyramid's footprint is not square. It was actually rectangular in shape. The difference between the sides is very slight, by only approximately 20 to 25 feet. But this small difference has a huge impact on the overall shape of the building that once stood here. It means that the building could not have been a pyramid, but was more likely a pyramid-shaped platform, just as we see on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States. This then makes it highly probable that this is the actual site of the monumental event of the righteous scribe Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth. This would also go a long way to explaining why this building was destroyed. It was also explain why this site has traditionally been off limits to study and has been under military jurisdiction for decades. It is simply to ensure that no one might stumble upon the secret of this site and possibly learn of the great event that took here. It is also so nobody can make the connection to the mystical symbolism of the unfinished pyramid and the all-seeing eye with this site. With this final piece, we can now, for the first time, begin to reconstruct this event that has been viewed by every single person who has ever glanced at the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States of America, located on the back of every single dollar bill as an unfinished pyramid and all-seeing eye. This allows us to begin reconstructing this all-important event, which appears to start when the two factions, the Lord of Light and the Goddess factions, unite and begin covertly working against the Lord God faction. As we touched upon before, we know that the great social and political problems the tribes of Israel caused by their refusing to honor, worship, or sacrifice to any other god but their own. This leads the other two factions to begin a covert campaign against the Lord God faction, which consists of corrupting the tribes of Israel to make them go a-whoring after the other gods of the heathen. To counter this, the Lord of the Sheep calls forth and appears to several of the sheep or messengers, who the righteous scribe Enoch is but one. He instructs them to go to the others that have become blinded and fallen away in order to help lead them back to the worship of their one true Lord. Enoch was the messenger that was sent to the people of Jerusalem and the first temple. But the people reject the message of their Lord brought by Enoch and the other messengers. The people not only rejected the message, but they then killed all of God's prophets, except for one who manages to escape, the one we know as the righteous scribe Enoch. He then escapes from Jerusalem, fleeing to the land of Egypt, where he then goes to a temple dedicated to the Lord God of Israel, which is the misidentified Pyramid of Djeffrey just north of the Giza Plateau. He then uses the Caducees in the temple to communicate to the Lord God faction the danger that he is in. Then, just before the forces chasing Enoch get to the temple, the mighty Lord God appears with his angels, which then attack the ones chasing Enoch. They and the other four that came forth also aid the Lord God in his rescue of Enoch at the last moment, saving him from certain death that befell all his other messengers. The primary reason this event is so important is because that this was the first time the other factions led by the Lord of Light openly fought back not only against the followers of the Lord God faction, but also the mighty Lord God himself. Not only do they fight back, but they appear to have won this opening battle, forcing the Lord God and his powerful angels to retreat. It seems like that once the Lord God and his angels had retreated, the ones that were trying to kill Enoch then turned their attention to the temple, destroying it, leaving the ruins of this destroyed platform, which we can still see to this very day at the site in Egypt known as the Pyramid of Djeffrey. This is a singular event that is symbolically shown on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States on the back of every single dollar bill since 1935. For it is showing us the great event of when Enoch was taken away from the generations of the earth. It is also the beginning of this great and almost totally forgotten war. This then allows us to finally understand that the true meaning of the mystical symbolism of the triangle depends directly on how it is used. Its meaning is directly related to the events remembered in the dream vision of Enoch. In addition, it is also directly related to the star that fell from heaven that one early morning so long ago. When a single triangle is used, commonly with stars in the background, it symbolically represents the star that fell from heaven, Lucifer and his fellow fallen watchers, who fell from grace and corrupted humanity and themselves. When three triangles are used together, again commonly with stars in the background, it symbolically represents the great flood of Noah and the destruction of the lost paradise of the fallen watchers. The final meaning is that when it is used with the all-seeing eye, most commonly on the back of the $1 bill with the unfinished pyramid, it symbolically represents the monumental event of Enoch being saved and taken away from the generations of the earth by God and the start of an almost forgotten war. With the final meaning being that it is also a highly heretical and forbidden graven image of the God Yahweh or Jehovah of the Bible, the God of the Israelites. After this great event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth, the dream vision and the Bible both tell us of the similar events of the people of Israel being taken away into captivity. But the dream vision adds additional information that is not within the biblical account. It also provides a slightly different series of events with the destruction of the legendary temple and the citadel of King Solomon. As we have seen before, the primary reason this part of the story is not in the Bible is because it simply paints the Lord God of Israel in a very poor light. In this case, he is not a kind, loving, and forgiving God of tradition, but he is one that seems to take great joy in watching his chosen people being destroyed. And he gave them over into the hands of the lions and tigers and wolves and hyenas, and into the hand of the foxes and all of the wild beasts. And those wild beasts began to tear in pieces those sheep. And I saw that he forsook that their house and their tower, and gave them all into the hand of the lions to tear and devour them, and into the hand of all the wild beasts. And I began to cry aloud with all my power, and to appeal to the Lord of the sheep, and to represent to him in regard to the sheep that they were devoured by all the wild beasts. But he remained unmoved, though he saw it, and he rejoiced that they were devoured and swallowed and robbed and left to be devoured in the hands of all the beasts. Book of Enoch, chapter 89, verses 55 through 58. Almost this entire section is missing from the biblical account. In the Bible, we are told that after the events of Enoch being taken away from the generations of the earth, that the great king of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, had come against Jerusalem. After conquering the city, he then took all the golden and holy items from the temple, bringing them back to Babylon. He then destroyed the first temple by burning it to the ground. King Nebuchadnezzar then took the remaining people of Jerusalem captive and resettled them back in Babylon. This is the beginning of what is known as the Babylonian captivity of the Jews. The dream vision gives us a completely different account of these events, that after the great event of Enoch being taken away from the generations of earth, once again, as we have seen before, this is another example where the story contained within the Bible has clearly been altered or edited to fit a particular religious or political message. One of the primary differences between the two stories, that unlike the biblical account, the dream vision tells us not only that were the Babylonians, the lions, and also their allies, the tigers, unleashed upon Jerusalem in the first temple, but that this also included the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Amorites, as they all fell upon the people of Israel. This also unleashed a great slaughter upon the tribes of Israel as the Lord God turned their back on them. Not only did their God turn his back on them, but apparently he was unmoved by their destruction. According to the dream vision, it appears that he took great joy in this fact, that they were being slaughtered in great numbers. Once again, it is easy to understand why this section was removed from the Bible, for it clearly shows us that the kind, loving, and forgiving God of the monotheistic tradition is not being truthful, and the God of the Bible was just as terrible or ruthless to our ancient ancestors as any of the other so-called gods. In our next video, we will introduce the mysterious shepherds and some of the fallout of the destruction of the first temple. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below and subscribe for future videos.